Yo, what's up? Now, today we are going to be talking about this pair right here, which is the soon to be releasing HIDIZS MK10. It is going to be releasing on September 25th on HIDIZS.net for a limited flash sale of $59 US. And if you are buying from anywhere with Amazon, it will be available on Amazon as well for this price point with tax. And with that out of the way, thank you to HIDIZS for sending these pair my way, because boy oh boy, I have a lot of crazy things to talk about. I'm speechless. Let's just roll this video. Now, before we begin, thank you to Audio Monster and HIDIZS for actually making this video possible. Definitely, they are not influencing me to say anything positive or negative about this particular IEM. But definitely, when I talk about this right now, you're gonna feel like, why is this guy so biased about this particular pair? Let me give you guys some context. This pair right here, it was sent to us quite early, before we even know how much is the price point, because we asked and they said they haven't finalized it. The only vague answer that we could get back then was, this thing will be cheaper than the MK12s. That is like extremely vague. So the MK12 is also $190 US. It is also a single DD. So with that assumption, knowing that this is a more entry level, we will assume it is, probably around $120, $130 US after listening to this. But boy, oh boy, I was quite happy that I am very, very wrong about the price, because, I exaggerated the price by twofolds. This is only $69 US retail. Nice. And as to why my personal judgment is saying that this thing is priced at so initially, let's talk about it. But before I get into that, a very, very quick rundown as to what you're getting, other than, the very obvious, shiny, nice looking IEMs that honestly looks like a Star Wars guy on the faceplate, which I never watched Star Wars. If you guys know who I'm talking about, you guys probably know who I'm talking about. And also a very good quality 2-core cable, which apparently is OFC, with a nice matte brushed finish on the jacks and the connectors. And also, yeah, it ends in a balanced output, which is a good thing. They give you two sets of tips, which, kind of cutely resembles Bintang Hulu. And the black translucent one is a more narrow bore, so it will be better in terms of, slightly elevating the nuances in the lower and mid bass. And this pair right here is kind of more balanced, and as always, I personally prefer the more balanced one. And one more particular thing is that this thing also provides you with some tuning nozzles, which is quite standard at this point. One is going to be more focused on treble, and one is going to be more focused on bass. The treble one, I feel like it definitely adds more airiness without any I would say compromises towards a risk of sibilance or a risk of being too sharp. But with that, definitely it causes a slight increase in thinness for the mid-range. The bassy one is quite nice, but obviously it is not going to be that significant. It is discernible, but after a few minutes you definitely forget about it. Other than that, this thing is also rocking a single DD config, a 10mm silicon carbide crystal diaphragm, and as always, it is with a metal zinc alloy shell. Fit, in my opinion, is honestly quite okay. I don't really have any problems about it. And given the fact that even though it is quite weighty, I feel like the ergonomics is done quite well, so that after 2 to 3 hours of listening, there's not really any fatigue. Because this thing is definitely more short nozzled, so you guys will definitely don't feel like it's a little bit too intruding. Now, when we're talking about sound quality, there's going to be two different distinct things. First is the first impressions, and the second one is after a proper burn-in. So I use my HIDIZS R6 2025 to properly burn it in for 30 hours. And during the second listen, definitely there's other very discernible stuff that you won't hear when you initially just started to use this for like the first 5 minutes. But nevertheless, my initial impressions on this are actually quite positive. Basically, it has a mild V-shape tuning with some very specific emphasis on the lower bass for some reason. Not sub bass, not mid bass, but specifically the juicy lower bass. That part is very dynamic. That part is very musical. I like it a lot. And this thing overall has a neutral tonality, as well as, for some reason, even though I said it's already focused on the lower bass, crispy mids. Crispy mids. It doesn't intrude you too much, but crispy mids. Now, starting off with the bass, this thing overall is quite fun sounding. It is quite strong. It is quite organic. The sub bass, in my opinion, is quite simple. It is rumbling with some good levels of diffusion, so you do not feel like there's going to be any congestion. This is true during the first initial impressions, and once you let it burn in for over 3 hours, it definitely opens up a little bit more, giving you more spaciousness, giving you more airiness. And like I said, this will be the main part of your interest. Bass heads will definitely find this thing interesting because the lower bass will definitely sound texturally alluring and very, very musical. Y'all definitely need to try this out, because when I wrote this in the context where this thing is worth 120 to 150 US dollars, give or take, and it is only 70 US dollars MSRP, and you can get it for 59. Why am I selling this thing so hard? Presentation of bass, in my opinion, is a little bit on the aggressive side, maybe because of the lower bass being more amplified and more punchy. I wrote it has decent definition, but assuming this thing was initially, the more expensive price point. So there's that. 808s also sound quite quick. 808s also sound quite responsive, and they give you a very good bounce. So I would say dynamics on the lower end are definitely very, very good. On to the next part, vocals. Now, vocals, in my opinion, the positioning is very, very well balanced in the sense where it is not too recessed or too in your face. It sits just in the same plane as everything else, which, don't get me wrong, I don't mean that it's flat. It basically just means that nothing is overwhelming one to the other. And vocals, in my opinion, feel quite tactile. It feels quite crispy in a way, which I personally quite enjoy. And take note that definitely this is something you need to know when you're getting this. If you are listening to any sibilants initially, it will definitely happen, and it took a good 30 hours of burn-in to basically, let it loose, let the drivers go loose. So after 30 hours, there's literally negligible amounts of sibilants, unless you have, basically very bad files. Male vocals, in my opinion, are presented in a more natural and a more relaxed way, so it's both engaging but also not too fatiguing. And as for female vocals, definitely they are on the lighter side, so you might occasionally feel like it is a little bit more aggressive. But with that being said, due to the crispy nature and the more airy nature that this thing has, expect some airy overtones that accompanies female vocals. Now, going on to the mids, the instruments, every single thing is quite transparent. It is quite musical with some levels of intent. Basically talking about the tactility of the thing, you feel like everything is responsive enough for you to actually hear clearly. Strings, in my opinion, are one of the more highlights of this set, giving you a more luscious and a more dreamy experience, mainly again because of the airy overtones. Keys and pianos, stuff like that, will be on the lighter side, but at the same time, it is more of a chorus effect where it blends into the ambience of the whole setting. Now, vocal ensembles, in my opinion, definitely has a very good amount of chorus effect. And let me just deviate a little bit. Chorus effect, for people who mix, you definitely know what that plugin is. For people who don't know, it's basically something like, let's say I'm talking right now, and if I were to put a chorus plugin, this is what I will sound like. I will basically sound like I am a little bit more fuzzy, but at the same time, this effect fills up the entire room a little bit more. This is the chorus effect. Now, going on to the upper mids and treble, one good thing about this is definitely for the percussion specifically, everything is crisp and has a very natural form of timbre. And comparing it to something more specific like, let's say, the NF Acoust NM20. The NF Acoust NM20 is given a more dry-ish presentation, where this thing is more focused on giving you a more pleasant and more musical experience. So this thing has a more decay and a more extension type of presentation, whereas the NM20 is more dry. Not to say that is bad, but that is used specifically for mixing, which I personally enjoy to use it more in that context. But let's say I'm listening to music, this thing is right up most people's alley because this thing is made for enjoyment. And definitely this also comes down to the mix. If let's say we're listening to more specifically, aggressive pop songs, there will be some slight chances that you might feel the percussions might get a little bit heaty. But it's mostly due to the mix again. Like I said, it's probably due to the files rather than the pair right here. And on the other hand, jazz stuff, kind of like, Snarky Puppy, they all do not have this issue, where it also provides you a very good level of ambiance and a very good level of airiness as well when they are hitting the drums. And last but not least, certain micro details, even macro details in this spectrum will definitely provide you a more spectacular level of resolution. And, like I said, this thing is crisp. So overall, it gives you a very nice level of engagement without going too much where you feel it's a little bit fatiguing. Moving on to the technicalities, dynamics upon first impressions is a little bit iffy, which again, I'll talk again about the burn-in issue. You definitely need to burn it in. Otherwise, initially when I heard this, The biggest issue that I had was the vocals and the mids having a little bit of some, inconsistencies and incoherencies here and there. Not to say that it's to the point where I'll say it has distortion, but it is quite incoherent in terms of the dynamics. After the burn-in, no such issues anymore. So remember, kids, burn in your IEMs. Why did I say it's... Why does that sound so cringe? Now moving on to Soundstage, this is where I like it when I wrote it like this. I wrote probably a giveaway towards the price, which I'm guessing is around the 120 to 150 US dollars mark, give or take. And I wrote down there, update. Oh boy, how wrong I was. How wrong I was indeed, in the best way possible. Because this thing, in my opinion, is definitely extremely wide for what it's worth. And I definitely priced it around 120 150 US dollars, give or take, because that's how much I think it's gonna be worth based on that being one of the factors. And the same consensus also runs with the imaging and the separation, where I wrote same consensus with Soundstage, except for mid specifically, the crisp nature aids in giving a more precise positioning, allowing a more immersive experience. And definitely, this is one more certain thing that I will say, is after the burn in, imagine everything becomes even more clearer, imagine everything becomes even more precise, and there's even less incoherencies so that everything sounds even more accurate. And last but not least, detail retrieval. I don't think I need to explain that much other than the fact that this thing handles details quite well. Everything is presented in a very crisp way so that micro details sound very lush. Everything sounds extremely, sparkly. So it definitely keeps you engaged, but not too much. So at the same time, this thing sounds musical. At the same time, it gives you enough technicalities, but not too much to the point where you feel like it's, fatiguing. With that being said, my final thoughts on this is that, I definitely overshot it. I definitely thought this was going to be even more pricey, but to say that you could get this amount of value for only 59 US dollars upon release, y'all should definitely get a pair, honestly. I'm not even gonna be like, I'm not even biased. I'm just quite surprised, kind of like the moment when I heard of how much it actually MSRPs for. So with that being said, thank you for watching. For everybody that wants a pair, y'all could definitely go down to the links below. I'll put everything down there. It will be releasing again on September 25th for a limited flash deal of only 59 US dollars. For Amazon, it will be again as so with tax, and everything else locally in Malaysia, I'll just put everything down there. Y'all could just get a pair, honestly. This is quite a no-brainer for people who want a V-shape tuning that is quite good on the bass with exceptionally crisp mids. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching this video. See you guys in the next one. Have a good day.